Hi, welcome to Ukrainian Connections. My name is Kathy Peroshi-Harris, Katrusha Peroshi-Harris, and Ukrainian Connections is a show about Ukrainian culture, our connections with the community, Thunder Bay, Ontario, Canada, internationally, anything about the arts, our history, stories that people have, artifacts that people want to talk about, different things about culinary expertise, all of that. Today we have a special guest, Daria Boyer, and I'd like to welcome you today.
Thank you so much.
So Daria has a family story to tell us about today. We're going to learn about the immigration of her family and the business that they started when they came to Canada, which I remember growing up with as well, and sort of the history and the meaning behind what it was all about. So Daria, maybe you could first tell us a little bit about where you came from, because I know you're not from Thunder Bay originally, and then a little bit about your father, Taras Baran.
I think I can start the story still with my father, Taras Baran. He grew up in Ternopil, in Buchach, actually, in western Ukraine, and he was apprenticing to be a barber. And at the age of 19, in 1939, the Second World War began, and all of a sudden things changed, and they had to flee the village, and they ended up in a displaced persons camp in Tyrol, Austria, in 1950, in Landeck specifically. And here is a photo of my father. And this is an album. He was the camp photographer, so he ended up with taking a lot of beautiful photos at this displaced persons camp. And this is his personal album from that he kept. His other one was donated. And then when the war ended, the family was able to immigrate to Canada, and they settled in Montreal around 1950. And being an immigrant, he was working in a deli, a European-style deli, and he noticed there were no Ukrainian greeting cards. And he decided to take it upon himself to and get in touch with some of the people that he knew and try to create some greeting cards.
So why was there a need for greeting cards?
Well, people were using non-Ukrainian cards, and it was just thought it would be great to have Ukrainian cards. At the same time, there was artists who were painting churches in Montreal, and so he had a lot of really good contacts, and they collaborated together and developed their first series of greeting cards, which would have been around 1955. And these over here on this display is an example of the Easter cards that were released, and as you can see, they are different than a lot of today's cards. This one says Christos Voskres, Voskresna Ukraina, which means that Happy Easter, Ukraine is going to rise as well. So it had like a more political message. And then they also had a more humorous card, and one that had a blend of religions with Kozake. And they had embroidery. So they were like Ukrainian theme, very specific to Ukrainian themes. And then there was another one.
Here, I'll just switch this.
Yeah, we'll switch them around. For the Christmas version. And one of the first cards here says, Навіть молитись ворог не дасть, which means that the enemy will not even allow you to pray, which was happening at the time in Ukraine under the Soviet Union. They were closing churches, not allowing people to follow that. And then we had like a more traditional card, and again, a blend of kozake with religious. And so it was like, I would say, a bit of experimenting going on to see what would be popular at the start. And at the same time, he was ready to open up his own barbershop. And so this is a flyer from advertising that he's opening the barbershop. He lived in a very immigrant area where a lot of Ukrainian immigrants were. It was called Lotus. And these are photos from the grand opening. And actually turned out that he ended up using the barbershop as headquarters for the greeting card business. So there was lots of room for storage. And I remember going there when I was little, and he'd be typing on the typewriter, and there was a whole bunch of boxes in the basement, and I would be playing around, and it was a great experience. So I've grown up with all of this as it was. This is actually his logo, Taras Baran. Originally, he had one Baran, because that's what the last name means. It means sheep. And when he got married, he had two. And actually, that's the photo of my parents. They got married in 1960. And so my mother, Olga Baran, who came from Lemkiushchina. So that's what that is. This is actually some of the stationery from the publishing business, and he uses the addresses of the barbershop, and this was like an order form, so it was a business. And his was one of the first business that was actually completely dedicated to publishing Ukrainian greeting cards. There were maybe other organizations or churches that would publish like standalone one or a couple of cards, but his was completely dedicated to this. He spent a lot of time trying to determine what would be the right designs, and the artists, they really collaborated a lot. And as I was able to find a lot of articles going back to that era, and people would discuss things about, oh, look, there's a new launch by this artist has published this artwork, and then they would discuss the quality of it, and this was really important to him. He would like highlight how he wanted to make sure that it was important that it was good quality artwork and so forth.
So how did he find artists?
Well, there were some that lived in Montreal that were like from there, and then there were the ones that were at the time originally they were painting the churches, and then there was a whole network of Ukrainians who had immigrated into the diaspora, and they by letter they would write. There was constant communication. For example, here I have a whole pile of letters from the artist. Was from Kraikivsky. He was at the time he was in Edmonton, and they would write to each other discussing, I'm looking for this, can you make this type of design? And then they would send sketches, and then that's how it went before the era of electronic communication.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about this picture here?
Sure. This one was in the anniversary, the 100th year of Taras Shevchenko's passing, and that was a big event, and so they wanted to commemorate it with a Christmas card. So that was, a unique design that they had to come up with, and the artist was Petro Andrusiu. He was one of the really exceptional artists that my father worked with, and you can see there's like a feather quill, and a young Taras is writing, and there's Ukraina here with some cities, and over here you have the religious part of it, and some writing. So that was. And this is the actual card that was published from that.
Wow. Well, thanks for starting us off with the explanation of how the company started, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Ukrainian Connections, and today we have guest Daria Boyer, and in our second section here, we have a whole bunch of beautiful posters and calendar covers. Can you speak to this?
Yes, this is an example of one of the posters by Petro Andrusiu. This is one of the originals, and what it looked like printed. And some of the printing here actually was done in West Germany, still way back when. Mostly in Canada, but then early on, that my father did have connections, and for some reason printed in West Germany.
Mm-hmm. And can you speak to some of these here as well?
Sure. So these are examples of some of the calendars that were made, that were very traditional designs, and they were printed originally these larger papers, eventually on smaller type of calendars. They had very traditional themes, very colorful. One of the things that was really popular was having the musical notes that accompanied the theme. Nichnaya, misechna, zoryana, yasnaya, vidno, holk zvichay. So this is like a beautiful midnight moonlight
romantic.
Right? And so that was popular, and people would use it for embroidery, for patterns, and so forth. And here is another very large one.
Here, I'm going to lift that one up so that we can
Okay.
get this scene here.
Another one. The calendar with the original.
And these were specifically done for calendars, right?
Yes, because after the posters, he realized that calendars was something that would be needed, and it would be credit unions that would buy it, and businesses, and they would. What happened is they would imprint the business names. Like, for example, here we'd have Firchuk Textiles in Toronto, Knižka kniha, and then we would actually have to design a calendar pad, and this had to be done manually back then. It was done originally by somebody typesetting, and then eventually my father would just literally cut and paste. Every year he'd change the dates, and somebody from the clergy would have to verify the dates were correct. And then they had to be printed, and we had to manually collate them, staple them. So this went on. This was literally a full-time job. All year there was something to do.
Can you speak to this one over here?
This is part of what I like to call the golden era of the greeting cards, and they were very beautiful, colorful, traditional images. These were by Leonid Denisenko, who was in Australia. We did a lot of cards with him, and during that era, people would send a lot of greeting cards, and that was a way to communicate with your friends and family. And phone calls were expensive, and people sent a lot of greeting cards, and they loved sending their own Ukrainian cards.
So how did people find out about the availability of cards?
It was advertised in the Ukrainian newspapers. They would be sold in the gift shops. They would be mentioned on the radio shows that they had back then, word of mouth, and phone calls not so much. I think eventually a bit more as time when they became a little bit less expensive, but it was a lot of written correspondence back then.
Okay, great. We're going to come back with another display. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Ukrainian Connections with my guest, Daria. And we're going to talk some more about cards. So explain what we have here at this beautiful table.
These are the most beautiful cards and artworks that were part of what I call the golden era. One of my favorites is artist Yulian Krajewski. These really vibrant and rich colors, and it's such beautiful traditional details done realistically. It's not over the top. It's not too romanticized. It is a way for people to remember their traditions and pass them on. They wanted to pass it on to their children and to share it with others and not forget. They would do like, this is Yordan, this is Christmas, this is caroling, this is like a interpretation of kozaki riding to do kolядування, Christmas caroling. Again, another Yordan. That was like a festival of Jordan after Christmas. That was the beautiful Hutzul costumes. Another Christmas scene with everything, like the colors, just everything matches and coordinates, and it's very beautiful
So Daria,
style.
Are these like originals?
Yes, they are. These are originals, and you can see the artists, like the paint, the detail of the pencil work, and everything. Like you can see that there's literally cut and paste happening sometimes. Like the logo would be taped on, or a message, or little changes made. That was
and are these?
how things
So
were.
this looks like a paint, but this almost looks like a charcoal. Of some, like an oil.
I'm not familiar with it, but it is very has lasted many years
Right.
since my father was born in 1920. It's been over 100 years. So this is from the 50s, 60s, and it's still in great shape. I have most of all the original artwork still in our possession. My possession. So.
Can you tell me about the more modern pieces?
Yes. So what happened over time? There were newer styles that came out, and so this was from the 70s. There was an artist, Titla, and did these lovely Ukrainian, more modern designs, and that's an example of that. Very colorful, very tastefully done, and Nova Radi Stava, Angele Pasta. So it's like Christmas Carol themes, and this would have been the inside of the cards. And then also this was another artist, Luba Majar, and this was another beautifully done Christmas card, and also cards for wedding showers and other themes. And so there was updating, modernizing happening. However, in general, if somebody wants to buy a Ukrainian card, they're still drawn to the more traditional designs. And so that is the themes. That is what people are interested in. As much as perhaps we attempted different styles. Again, as time goes on, you're always trying different things. But you do need a blend. I found you did need a blend. But in general, the classics were the more popular ones.
And I think you mentioned earlier that sort of romantic or the folkloric romantic stories and with the songs with them.
Yeah.
So I see you also have some embroidery patterns. Can you talk about that?
And these were published in 1972. My father collaborated with Oksana Mushenska, and they came out with a series of Ukrainian embroidery sheets. And women of that era were all embroidering blouses and pillows and different things, and it was hard to find patterns and information in general before the internet age. And so he was actually working on a second series, but it was never published. And so times are starting to change in general as the population was aging, the younger folks were getting a bit more assimilated, and people were not sending as many cards. A lot of different changes were happening, started to happen. And there was more competition. There's other companies coming out with greeting cards in the USA, Australia. And the other thing that happened is the credit unions started publishing their own calendars, multi-page calendars, which was tough competition. And in time, it became more challenging. So I remember my father, he actually got sick, and I was getting heavily involved, and I mentioned to him, like, I wanted to get a computer, and he's like, oh, what are you going to do with a computer? Like he just couldn't imagine, what I would possibly do with that. So I went ahead and bought one anyways, and I designed a new calendar pad from scratch. It didn't involve cut and paste anymore, because they were getting a little ratty. It was getting a little tough to do the cutting paste, and I asked him to come up and see what I'd done. And he was so impressed. He's like, wow, that is the most beautiful calendar pad we have had for a long time. And then he was looking at the computer, and I was moving the mouse, and he was like, what is that little fly going across the screen? And I go, I had to explain to him what that was, the cursor moving across the screen. So I still remember up to this day how that started happening. And I could sort of tell that he was, at the point where, he knew it was time to move, to let things go, and it was time to pass it on. So I was definitely part of the digital age, Photoshop, computer graphics, and I moved to Thunder Bay in December of 95, and I started working with a photographer in town to try to see what, let's do photography and and try to find what there is in Thunder Bay. And I found lovely Chaban, Dance, and Kathy. We did some photo shoots, and we ended up publishing some greeting cards.
That's right.
From that. We had an Easter card, and there is a calendar, and I ended up doing photography at the Holy Protection Parish. And we have a calendar from that, and we have a calendar with the Chaban children as well, which we'll show you in the next segment.
Yeah, great. Can you tell me a little bit about the past, the actual printing of everything?
It was very very manual intensive. These are some examples of some of the insides of the cards, or you can see that this has been cut and pasted, and there was touch-ups done. But in general, the artwork was taken to a photo studio. There was film made of the artwork, and then it was taken to a printing company, and they would make the CMYK printing like films, each film life-size, and then there was plates, metal plates, and it was all very large and cumbersome and not like today's where everything doesn't even almost exist. It's all digitized. So that was a very quite elaborate process, and I have a few negatives still here from one of the calendars. This is an example of printing I did. So that's just one of those.
Let's see what this. Can I pull this apart?
You can, but what happened is that they kind of got stuck together.
So these are the negatives.
The negatives have not. It's harder to maintain for them to still be useful over time. Whereas digital, everything gets worn. But that's what's beautiful about the originals.
Right.
Is they're still in perfect condition.
They're amazing. They are absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
This artist is amazing.
Yes.
With his rich colors.
It is.
There is your folder of your Thunder Bay stuff. Maybe we can talk about that now.
This is the card that we made, the Easter card from the Chaban dancers. And we have the calendar with Chaban at Gammondale Farm. And then this was a photo taken of Holy Protection of one of the icons that doesn't exist anymore.
I know, that church was sold.
This was the calendar made from that.
So you took this photo?
I was a photographer I worked with.
Okay.
I had like proper equipment and all that.
Okay.
This is what a publisher is. That is what people think, that you doing all the artwork. But as a publisher, you're the kind of like a middle person. You're working with artists and photographers, and you're looking for things. You're trying to come up with things, and then you run the business part of it. So that's publishing.
Wow, this is an amazing history. And what's your hope now for all of this beautiful history?
Well, I'd love to find a home for it, or for it to be seen and appreciated. There is a lot of history here. It would be a shame for it to just be lost. So I'm hoping that perhaps your lovely show will, perhaps it might lead to something, or I'm going to try to work on some historical documentation of the artists and the artwork and some of the things that has things happened, because to me it seems so natural. I've grown up with this, but for a lot other people it's all new, and they're not familiar with it, how everything happened and the things that happened.
Well, it's interesting because back when I was buying a lot of greeting cards, I can remember buying a lot of these cards. I think I've bought, some that you have in your binder even.
Yes.
And so for people that are watching the show, if anybody has ideas of places where they could be exhibited, museums or resource libraries with a Ukrainian connection, to message me and I'll get the information to Daria. Okay, so let's look at this here.
And I guess we can close out with looking at albums of some of the beautiful the different albums. So these are some of the early ones. Many different artists, so many artists over the years.
Well, there's this artist here. I can see
yes, that's that one. Dobralish, and I remember some of the play-by-play as things happened, the discussions that took place, and when I was little.
Sounds like some novels that you could be writing as well.
Well, no, I have enjoyed definitely doing the research for this. And yeah, Petro Andrusio again. And then some of the more modern styles, how they were different. I'm just going to skip a few pages here. This is from the Millennium series, when that was what was 1988. That became the theme of that time. And these are the new releases. There were others that we'd repeat once in a while. Some of the older classics. This is a popular one, the one with the children. And some of this particular artist he designed one of the first Ukrainian hryvnias. So he was based in San Francisco.
Okay.
Vasil Lopata, and I worked with him, and he designed a few cards.
Wow. So the hryvnia is the Ukrainian money.
The initial one before it became, I think it was like a transitional currency of that time.
After the kopika.
Yeah. So and here's some Easter ones. Easter cards.
And as we're flipping through this, I want to thank everybody for joining us today on Ukrainian Connections. And as we are nearing, we're filming this on February 23rd. So tomorrow is the fourth year of commemoration of the war on Ukraine that's happening, and I'd like people to give consideration to that. Remember Ukraine in many ways. If you can financially, if you can by lobbying and directing political support, as well as in your prayers and positive thoughts, and help those who are struggling in this war, who have been displaced, and those that are still suffering in Ukraine and have lost so much. So please keep them in your heart and mind, and in as many ways as you can. Daria, I must thank you today for this amazing exhibit. This is
Thank you
so much here.
Thank you for inviting me. It was an honor to be able to share this with you and your viewers.
Yeah, well, thank you. And again, if anybody has ideas on how to best preserve this for the world to see, send me a note. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy.